Timothy Ferriter seemed absolutely stunned inside the courtroom as the jury told the world he was a child abuser, a criminal, a grown man who abused a young boy by hiring a contractor to build an 8x8 box in the garage to lock up his adopted son. While Ferriter was stunned, his wife seemed broken, crying in the gallery. But tonight, very few people who followed this story or watched this trial are shocked. This was a verdict most of us expected. So why were the Ferriters seemingly caught off guard by the guilty verdicts? And what will life be like for Timothy Ferriter as he now gets locked in a box behind bars? Tonight, we are live from Palm Beach County, Florida, with all the fallout and all the reaction as our investigation of what happened to the boy in the box continues.
I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a verdict night, big case, big verdict. The jury spoke, they spoke loudly. Tonight we're going to go through all of it. But I want to begin here with that box that was built in the garage. The reason I call it a box, and I questioned myself for a moment, like, should I be calling it a box? Well, the man who built it spoke to me months ago, probably more than a year ago, about building it. And he was told to build a box in the garage, okay? That's what he said to me. So that's why from the beginning I've been calling it a box. So why? Well, the guy who built it told me that he was told to build a box inside the garage. Now, that box, for this defendant and for this defense team, a lot of times defense attorneys have to deal with what we call bad facts. And this box was not just a bad fact. This was the whole case. This was the entire thing. And first impressions are a lasting impression. Now, I've covered cases and stories through the years where children have been locked in smaller caged boxes and areas. And in those particular cases, it was clear that this was child abuse. I mean, it was beyond clear from the beginning. But these were like demented, sick people who were beyond the pale. Like there was something totally wrong, like serial killer type people that would do things like that. This case, it's still a box, but it's a different box. It's 8x8, okay? It's 8x8, he gets out and he goes to school. So it was a slightly different situation. So going into this case, you've got the box, right? And no, why? Why do you have this box? Well, here's the problem. While his attorneys made arguments and that's all fine and good, Tim Ferriter never got up on the stand and never offered an explanation. That's what I was waiting for, all right? Because I can look at him, okay, he's a criminal, shouldn't have done it, he's convicted. But I always saw him, it was a slightly different scenario than those other stories I had covered through the years of these completely demented people, caging children, starving them, you know, torturing them, not letting them leave, right? This was different. This was a family that was sort of functioning. But I was waiting for the explanation. I was waiting for him to look, from his perspective, look the jury in the eyes, but like, why? Like, explain to us what was going through your mind, what was your situation, how did you get to that conclusion that building this box was what I needed to do, and what did it symbolize to you? Because the whole case was about why he built it, what the purpose of it was, and how he got there, and he never offered that explanation. Again, defendants don't have to testify. I know, you don't have to remind me. The defense attorneys remind me every night in the show. I get it. But you locked him in there. That's it. You locked him in there. And once you lock someone in there, we don't lock children up in boxes. We don't do that. In a civilized society, we do not do that. So if you do that, and you think you're not committing a crime, you got to explain it. you have to understand it, like who you are and what you were going through and why you ended up there. Because we don't do that. And you want to call it a room, you can't, because it's not a room, it's not a bedroom. It doesn't have a window. It doesn't have a closet. Not a bedroom. Anyone who's been in realty knows that. It's not a bedroom. And by the way, again, the guy who built it built a box. That's the word he used. With all that said, today's verdict, from my perspective, and I think your perspective, and everyone who's talked about it, was predictable. Were we expecting the jury, without any real explanation from this defendant, to say, oh yeah, I could see someone locking a child in a box for 18 hours with a bucket, locking it from the outside and putting him in the garage while the rest of the family's inside. No access to the air conditioner, we'll control that. Yeah, that's reasonable. No, that's not reasonable. It's absurd. Now, on this show, we've had people on who've been in a similar situation, and they explained how intense it gets and how difficult it gets. Children who are suffering from this condition and are at the end of the spectrum, that is, things are bad and they're violent and they're dangerous. Yeah, but guess what? None of them built a box in their garage. They didn't. We don't do that. So for those of you who did not see the verdict, and to me that's a big part of the story tonight, I get the feeling like Timothy Ferriter wasn't expecting to hear the words guilty. Let's take a look.
In the Circuit Court of the 15th Judicial Circuit, Criminal Division in and for Palm Beach County, Florida, case number 22 CF001136, BMB Division B, State of Florida versus Timothy Dunn Ferriter, defendant. Verdict. We, the jury, find as follows. As to count 1, we find the defendant guilty of aggravated child abuse as charged in the information. As to count 2, we find the defendant guilty of false imprisonment as charged in the information. As to count 3, we find the defendant guilty of neglect of a child as charged in the information. So we say all this 12th day of October 2023 in West Palm Beach, Florida, signed by the jury foreperson.
So there's his stoic reaction inside the courtroom. I looked at him and I said, it didn't look like he was necessarily expecting that. I guess lawyers can try to prepare you, but this is someone who I think believed, perhaps in his own mind, that this was somewhere on the spectrum of reasonable, his actions. They weren't criminal. We also have Tim and Tracy's reaction after the verdict. Do we have Tracy's reaction? Okay. We'll keep an eye on it because I want to see everyone inside that courtroom, because Tracy is facing the same charges. Same charges. So she's watching what's happening to her husband at this moment. And now we know he's going to go and be locked away. We don't know the exact amount of time, but he's been out. He hasn't been locked up. He's going to be in a box right now. That's where he's going. So I don't know what's going through his mind, but here he has an opportunity to turn to his supporters behind him, including his wife. The man behind him testified during the trial. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Julie Janae as we continue in the courthouse. Okay, let me start here, Julie Janae, as we watch more of this reaction inside. Tracy, obviously, he got to hug her. Some defendants don't get that. They get cuffed right away. Guilty, cuffed, you're off. But he's very cooperative, I get it. What was it like inside that courtroom?
Yeah, Vinny, that moment I was kind of holding my breath because I didn't know if the deputies were going to come and stop him from doing that. I noticed that he was about to go and reach for his wife, and I've seen some defendants be blocked from having any kind of communication with the people behind them after they have been found guilty. But something that's unique about this courtroom is that all of the attention is on the defendant because there wasn't really anyone there for the victim in the sense of the victim was not in the courtroom. His sisters, who were in the courtroom for the closing arguments, were not there for this verdict. I don't think I even noticed the foster parents that have been there who were involved in this child's life over some time and over in his sister's life. Didn't see them during the verdict, so all that attention was on Timothy Ferriter. His attention immediately turned to his wife. He reached to hug her. He was whispering something to the two men who were there next to her. And this jury, they did not make any eye contact with the Ferriters. That's what gave me the first indication when they walked into the courtroom that their verdict was not favorable to Tim Ferriter. But you're right, I didn't see any real emotion or like he was processing this. It was like he just immediately went to his wife to make sure she was taken care of and then was ready for these officers to take him to the corner of the courtroom where he very slowly and methodically went through taking off his belt, taking off his tie. Tracy Ferriter, though, seemed like she was not prepared for this or just really emotionally couldn't handle what was happening. She broke down. I just saw her crumple into the friend that was there sitting next to her, crying. She had her hand over her face, and then she was quickly rushed out by several people out of the courtroom away from the media. She did not give any comment afterward.
Right, and you know, they're not career criminals. Neither one of them. They don't have a rap sheet. They haven't been through this system, in and out of being incarcerated. These are first-timers in the whole thing. And, yeah, life is going to be I mean, it already was, but now it gets way, way different. So tell us about some of the reaction down there in Palm Beach County after this verdict.
Yeah, we were able to speak to the defense attorney for the defendant. Priya Murad spoke to Court TV, and she was able to talk to us about some of the things that's happening next. But most importantly, we wanted to know, question number one, why didn't he take the 24-month deal on the table? And she mentioned something that we didn't know before that had to do with that deal and his wife, Tracy. A lot of people were wondering about the 24 months that was offered by the prosecution at one point before this case, and of course now that he's facing 40 years at sentencing in November, wondering if he should have taken the deal. But you revealed something to me that people may not have known that was a condition of that 24 months.
So the plea deal that we were provided was 2 years followed by 5 years probation, contingent on Tracy either taking a plea or Tim doing a proffer against Tracy. I had asked the prosecution what the plea for Tracy would be, and we never knew it. It was kind of okay, if he's not interested, then, you know, we're not going to negotiate on Tracy's end. So the decision that we made based on that, I mean, I think it's a little misleading to say that there was a clear plea deal in this case. It was made very last minute and close to trial. And, you know, Tim wanted to tell through the trial his story as well. So that was a plea deal that we spoke about in great detail and that he rejected, as he has a right to do.
So he had two options, Vinny. He could have either testified against his wife and taken the deal, and he would have had to proffer his testimony early on, so they would have known it was on the record. He couldn't have changed his mind once he got to her trial. Or she would have had to take an undisclosed deal, which he didn't know what it would be. And it seems that they must have really thought it was possible to get a not guilty if they thought that her deal would have been any harsher than his. Hers likely would have been less harsh because she was not the one yelling and physically abusive, according to the juvenile in this case.
Absolutely. You know, these things, I mean, a plea deal, I mean, it's a huge difference in the level of exposure, and there's a level of certainty, and you can plan things, but you have to admit your guilt, number one, and you have to say, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to go in, I'm going to serve my time. And for some folks, just the thought of 24 months is like, wow, 24, yeah. But now you're looking, what is it, 24 years, 5 years, 10 years? We don't know what it's going to be. Another big part of this case, and it was something that we tried to bring out in this show, which was some of the evidence that the jury didn't see. Because to me, the whole case was about why. Why did we know what they did? They hired the contractor, they built the case, they locked him in there, but why? What was going on? And some of that evidence, from my perspective, was, you know, painted a different picture than I think the jury got here. What did the defense have to say about that?
Attorney Murad said that they are going to have that #1 as their appeal issue once this case gets before a higher court, because they do think that the judge made some rulings in error that changed the course of this case. We had a bit of a bombshell moment during the jury deliberations because they saw a video that the defense wanted in of how the police handled the juvenile in this case, the victim. Once they located him after he had run away, they put him in cuffs and put him in the car. They wanted that video in front of the jury so that they could see what he was like in that moment when he wasn't in that box. But the judge did not allow that in. But take a listen to what Priya Murad said about that evidence that they tried very hard to get in.
So we filed several motions in limine regarding the child's behavior prior to when he ran away on January 28th, 2022. We were cut off anything prior to the age of about 9 or 10. The court found that it was temporally irrelevant. Even after the state's expert, Wade Meyer, said, oh, there's nothing before the age of 10, we were not permitted to cross-examine on that despite asking. My expert, because, you know, just given the rules of evidence, was not able to specifically speak about it. So we were very limited in what we could offer as far as the prior record. We also wanted to admit, to show no malicious intent, that there were actually adults since the removal that have had to take actions due to the fact that the behavior of the child was not improving. Again, it's not my intention to disparage the child, but these are in written pleadings that we believe that it was essential for the jury to hear this, because it shows that how other grown-ups, right, how other adults are acting towards him, which goes to this idea of intent. And it also, you know, there is a level of hypocrisy here from the state that, you know, we have taken a child from a situation into another situation that should be improving and better. The state's expert testified that if you take a child with an attachment disorder and remove them from that situation, you anticipate to see improvement. We asked if we could then discuss what was previously not permitted in evidence, and we were not allowed to do so. So, look, it is the government's job to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. This idea that people should take the stand or need to take the stand and tell their story is really distant from what the Constitution requires. And so we made a decision based on, you know, our belief that at that time the evidence that the state presented was not sufficient. The jury, of course, took that and, you know, came with the verdict that they did. But, you know, after a guilty verdict, you go back and you think through everything, right? Your voir dire, you know, could I have done this or that differently? But I do feel that we put on, you know, absent some of the rulings, the best case that we could on behalf of Tim. And, you know, we're going to be pursuing an appeal for him.
Attorney Murad did not say that there are any kind of regrets that her client has or that they have as a team of not putting him on the stand. Vinny, I noticed something in the file, that there were some Google accounts that the children hacked into and provided it to their guardian ad litem. The defense was trying very hard to keep that out. I didn't hear anything about whatever was found on those Google accounts, but I wonder if that could have been a limitation for taking the stand, if some of that evidence could have come out if he got on the stand and opened the door.
Yeah, when you get on the stand, you open the door, ask Alec Murdaugh about that. But you know what? In a case where prosecutors are trying to prove motive, like in Alec Murdaugh, where all this other evidence came in, I thought that was proper. I like the jury having more information. But I think it's a two-way street. When the issue is the motive as to why he did what he did, and the defense is limited in what they can do, I'm not disagreeing with the verdict, but I just like the jury to have more information. But that's my style. I'm not the judge, and we'll see what the appellate court does with all that. Now, you also spoke with the prosecutors today. What did they say about the children here?
Yeah, Assistant State Attorney Brianna Coakley and Karen Black talked to us about, first of all, what parents should do if they're dealing with having a child who has RAD, reactive attachment disorder. They said they should seek professional help, medical professional help, as soon as possible. That's what they tell anyone who comes through their office who's dealing with this. But they say this is a particularly rare thing for them to see. Take a listen to our question about anything they can provide about how those children are doing now.
Well, I think that any case that involves a parent and a child is like inherently difficult. I think a lot of times cases get talked about in the media and it gets kind of get lost that this is a real child, this is his real life, and this really happened to him. And so it's certainly complex for any child to have to come in and testify against their parents. He knows that there are consequences for his parents, and that can be very difficult for a child to have to come in, especially when a case has gotten a lot of media scrutiny.
Said about the victim. And we did ask specifically Karen Black to see if the children, if she could provide whether they were doing well. She said, of course, they can only say that they are doing well. They've been in court. They seem to be doing well. They didn't want to give any more details about how the juvenile in this case is doing at this time, which it became an issue of whether or not the jury could know about how he is doing at this time.
Yeah, to me, that's another part of this whole scenario. But the whole thing about him not testifying, I just have to disagree. Like, he had the box built. The child was in the box. The child was locked in the box. You've got to let the jury know why, because we don't do that in our society. We're just not going to let you go. No one's going to say, oh yeah, you can build a box, put a child in. You're not going to do that. I mean, that's like a reality check, I think, for Ferriter. But there may have been other things that would have come out, as you said. All right, so what is next for this defendant?
Vinny, I think you said what is next. We hope everyone's okay and these fire trucks going by right now. But what's next for Tim Ferriter? He's being booked into the Palm Beach County Jail, processed, and he will be there until sentencing. That sentencing is happening November 16th. It's going to be a couple of hours. Both sides are going to present their evidence, call their witnesses, and the defense said that the range, his minimum based on the guidelines, is 35 months. So more than that plea deal that he turned down. They are going to be filing a motion that the judge would have to approve for a downward departure from that minimum in the guidelines, but 35 months all the way up to 40 years is what Judge Coates will be the one deciding.
That sentencing, only 2 hours, but perhaps bigger than the trial itself with all of that range. Julie Janae, long day, great work as always. Thank you so much, Julie Janae, Court TV legal correspondent, joining us from Palm Beach County. Life for Tim Ferriter, what's it going to be like now that he's going to be living in a box behind bars? Plus, coming up next hour.
In Sarasota County, Florida, the Take Care of Maya trial continues as Maya Kowalski tells her story to the jury and what it was like to be taken from your family and isolated in a hospital.
Pre-John Hopkins, I went to church every Sunday, and I went to Sunday school, so I'd get communion once a week.
And once you got in there, what happened? How were your spiritual needs fulfilled?
They weren't. So I was not allowed to have the communion that my priest from my church at home brought.
There's a tragic outcome in this case.
Civil trial that is the focus of the Netflix documentary Take Care of Maya.
How a misdiagnosis tore their family apart.
They continue to accuse Jack and Beata of being child abusers.
Jack called me and said Beata just hung herself.
Is the hospital they're suing responsible for what happened?
The Take Care of Maya trial. Trial coverage weekday mornings at 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
The animals had the freedom to go around the house, yet he was the one that was locked in that box. The state never made any allegations that he was in there 24/7. The state never said that he had never left his room. He did. The only time he left his room was when there was a parent around. When they told him, you're allowed to come out. It was not reasonable to lock him in a box. It was not reasonable to leave him in the dark. It was not reasonable to leave him in the room with no air conditioning. It was not reasonable to make him pee in a bucket.
Timothy Ferriter convicted today. That's the headline. for locking his son in a box, 8x8 box in the garage. Well, now Timothy Ferriter, after this conviction, will be locked in a box inside a prison. But before he goes to prison, he'll be in the jail down in Palm Beach County. Got a little bit of information about that jail for you tonight. 2,166 bed capacity. It's located on Gun Club Road in West Palm Beach, Florida, 835,000 square feet. 52.8 acres, inmate population, pretrial and unsentenced adult males like Timothy Ferriter, and the average population about 1,769 on any given day. Here's something else that we found out about this jail. The facility is temperature controlled throughout. The only area not air conditioned are the kitchens and laundries, and there are the appropriate number of toilets, urinals, and showers in the housing units, unlike the box that Timothy Ferriter put his son in. He will have air conditioning and facilities to go to the bathroom. All right, let me bring in our guest. Joining us tonight in West Palm Beach, Florida, criminal defense attorney Wayne Richter. In Stuart, Florida, Wayne's client, former Florida inmate James May is with us. And finally, in Orlando, Florida, psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey. Welcome to you all. Thank you so much. James, especially thank you to you, because there's questions I have for you that I can't answer, but you can. Give us, first of all, what the living conditions you would expect to be when he is sent away to prison will be for Timothy Richter. What kind of room will he be in? How much space? What do you have?
The AC you were talking about will be gone. They don't have air conditioning in prison other than 2 prisons in the state of Florida for males. So he's not going to have to worry about any of that. Now, as far as the living conditions go, he'll be in about a 10 by 12 cell, sharing a room with another person. The toilet's going to be right there. They're not very clean environments. And as far as things go with the type of charge he's got, he's not headed for anything nice. Depending on who he meets or how they do it, they're going to try to finesse him out of, well, if he gets money, his canteen. You know, if he's not willing to fight, and you know, a lot of things could happen to him bad. As far as that goes, I'd like not to say. You know, prison ain't nothing nice.
So when someone like Timothy Ferriter, obviously he's never been in prison before, comes in, I mean, we've been watching him. We haven't heard much from him, but he's got, you know, the gelled hair, nice haircut, all of that. Is that something that is held against him by other inmates, or will they kind of feel him out?
First, he's going to hit a reception center where the guards are at their worst. They let you know that you're basically a flea in their world. He'll be stripped down naked and strip searched and in front of probably about 100, 150 men. And then he'll be made to go to his cell and wait, which for a haircut. And all that gelled hair will be gone. And then he's given his uniform. Then they give you the whole rundown of what's going to happen as far as don't take in anything from any other inmates and all the rules. But they speak so fast you can really barely hear them, you know. But so all that, they'll smell the fear on him, put it to you that way. He's not going to do too good, you know. It depends on what region of Florida he goes in. The northern region of Florida is a lot more violent than the southern region. So depends on where he goes, how they're going to try to take advantage of it. A lot of inmates these days like to finesse, like try to sell you drugs or things of that nature, you know. But then up in the northern region, they'll do things like hand you a list of canteen items to go to the window and get. And if you don't come back with that list, then, you know, he'll be beaten pretty bad or even worse. But he's going to spend a lot of time in what's called being a check-in. That's protective custody. You can at any time go up to a guard and say you fear for your life, and they'll put you inside of a confinement where they'll do an evaluation. They'll want an inmate's name of who is threatening you and how it happened or whatnot, and then at that point they'll ship you to another camp. So he does have that option to run away and be what's called a check-in.
Dr. Janie Lacey, what will this transition in life be like? Now, he's been accused and all of that building up to this, but this is a major difference. He has not been locked up waiting for his trial. He's been out on bond. So now tonight he'll be with the county sheriff, and after November 16th, he'll be a ward of the state. What's that going to be like for him mentally?
Well, we would consider what he was believing up until he got his verdict. So if he truly believed that he was going to be found not guilty, then that transition, there's going to be this period of disbelief. And while he's in that disbelief, there's going to be this rumination. He's probably going to be replaying things over and over in his mind while he's still in this position. So it's almost like we call it a split self. It's almost where he's separating himself psychologically. And then I would imagine at some point, as we just heard, there's going to be a reality check that he's not going to have the same conditions that he's probably been used to in his life. And especially when we consider coping mechanisms, how he was in his real life, if he was someone that, let's say, make an assumption that he thought he was above, and maybe he thought he was going to get off on this particular charge. So there will be a reality check, and then we'll probably see some depression, and as we just heard, probably some anxiety, which will manifest as fear. So I would imagine there's going to be a gamut of transitions of emotions and things that he's probably going to experience that he's probably not have up until this point have ever seen himself in his life being in this position. So it's going to be a reality check and a rude awakening for sure.
Wayne Richter, when someone's on trial, they rely on their attorneys for everything. How do you see this transition for someone like Tim Ferriter? Okay, he's got money, living a relatively cushy life in Jupiter, Florida, all of that. He had problems at home, obviously, and that's why he ended up being convicted of this child abuse. But how does someone like that make that transition? Do you think they can prepare for that?
It's going to be tough. It's incumbent upon the lawyer to, prior to the trial and subsequent to the verdict today, to kind of explain and give as much information to the client that you can to tell them what their future is going to be like, how their life is going to dramatically change in the next few months and potentially years. And it's a tough conversation to have.
James, let me ask you something else down the road, because you've spent time out, behind bars, but you're out now. He's not getting a life sentence. He's going to go in. I don't know if it's going to be 3 years, 5 years, 15 years, whatever it is. How difficult is it to go from prison to then back out in society?
Well, a person like him, maybe he has money, maybe he don't. But the average person like me, I've personally been locked up more times than I can count. I actually have 72 criminal charges, give or take. But it's pretty hard when you get out. Like they have transitional housing, halfway housing, but there's a thing in there that the people in it don't care about you. And there's a lot of drugs inside these halfway houses. There's a thing called halfway house shuffle, where you get free health insurance and you go in the halfway house, you do good for a couple months, then you relapse, then you get put back into a rehab, and they use your insurance up to the max, and then they schedule you to go into another halfway house. And that's basically the life for some people. It's called a halfway house shuffle. A lot of people don't like going to halfway houses, the mentally ill, and they wind up on the streets. I've been on the streets more times, probably a few years of my life, probably 3 years of my life I had to spend on the street because I didn't really want to go live in a halfway house. But yeah, it's pretty rough. There's not a lot of help out there, and the halfway houses ain't all they really cracked up to be.
James May, I appreciate you coming on tonight. Not everyone in your position would do that, but the information is very valuable, I think, for anyone watching. And we wish you the best of luck, that you can find a life on the outside. Wayne Richter, Dr. Janie Lacey, please stay with us. We've got more to get to. We're going to talk about Tracy Ferriter. She's got charges coming up, too. She has a trial coming up. We saw what happened with her today. What is that going to be like? We'll talk about it when we come back.
This is Alex Murdoch. My wife and child just got badly.
On the premiere episode of an all-new Court TV true crime series.
This case was unlike a normal murder case.
Suspicion that they're dead? No father could do that to his son. No Murdoch could do it to a Murdoch.
He has a long history of deception.
Once I told a lie,
The roads all came back to LA.
I had to keep learning.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rowlands. Premieres Sunday night, 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Thanks to both sides for the commendable job that each of you did. All right, thank you.
That was Tracy Ferriter. You see her in the gallery breaking down after the verdict. Her husband is gone. She's not going to see him. We'll see him at sentencing. She could probably visit as well through the glass over at the county jail in the build-up to all of this. But her trial is just around the corner. Welcome back, folks. Timothy Ferriter guilty today. Tracy Ferriter has a trial that is scheduled. Julie Janae spoke with the assistant state attorney about that. Let's take a listen.
Tracy Ferriter, we saw her very emotional today inside of the courtroom, and many were surprised that she was able to be in the courtroom, but she's out on bond. Her case has not been set for trial yet. Are you all the prosecutors on that case as well?
We are, yes. Her case will get a trial date going forward, but because they were severed, we decided which defendant to go on first.
Does she get a similar deal that her husband turned down now that we have finished his trial?
There hasn't been a plea offer extended in this case. We were trying to see whether or not we were going to resolve Tim's case first, but I don't know at this point whether or not there's going to be one. That's something that the defense and I will discuss going forward.
Let's bring back in our guest, Wayne Richter, great criminal defense attorney down there in West Palm Beach, Florida, Dr. Janie Lacey in Orlando. All right, Wayne, what are your thoughts about Tracy Ferriter? What do you think's going to happen here? Like, she watched that trial. She's going to be looking for a deal, I would think.
I don't see that. I don't want to throw a monkey wrench in your program, but I don't see her going to trial. I mean, she just had a front row seat to her husband's case. It's going to be the same prosecutors. The state's not going to have any radically different evidence to present. I think she needs to start, giving some serious consideration with her defense counsel on how to approach the state and how to resolve this without a trial. That's what's going to be in her best interest.
If there is a trial, could you see a scenario where Timothy Ferriter gets called by the defense and just says, it was me, it was me, it was me?
No, I mean, she's cleared. We hear her on all the videos from the Ring doorbell or the Ring camera that was inside the box. So she's not going to be able to distance herself from this. I heard Janae say earlier, that a lot of times maybe Tim was more aggressive with the child regarding his tone of voice. But she knew what was going on inside that house, and there's evidence to prove that she knew what was happening.
All right, Dr. Janie Lacey, take us inside Tracy Ferriter's world right now, her mind. She just watched her husband get convicted. She's facing charges. What's going on with her tonight, you think?
Well, what I think and what I imagine is that she's also in shock and disbelief, and then some fear and some anxiety is probably setting in because this is a preview to what she just witnessed, and what she just walked through with her husband is a preview of what she potentially will walk through depending on the options and the decision at the table. But I would imagine that she is full of anxiousness and anxiety and a disbelief. And that would be reasonable given this situation, as she watched and supported. And we know, as we watched and heard, that she was supportive and she was cooperative, as her husband was the primary person disciplining their child, and she was very supportive from what we can hear.
All right, let's take a listen to some of Tracy Ferriter, because as Wayne pointed out, she's on the video as well. You'll only hear it because we're not permitted to show you the video portion of it.
Do you have pajamas? Are those them right there? Do you hear me? Oh, here we go. Back to this where you can't talk. You're a middle school boy. You want to do all these things. You want to do chess. You want to do things. But you can't talk because you got caught being dishonest. Okay. Well, that's fine. Guess I'll just keep giving you more chances. Every day, new chance for even though doesn't care, he doesn't want to be nice to anyone. Well, let's let do this. Oh, let's let me bring some food because I think he's gonna have a good night. Oh, let me do everything for okay. Oh, can't talk because he got in trouble because he got caught. It's like, give me a break. Start owning up to what you're doing, and then try to fix the problem, like we keep telling you.
All right, Wayne, do you think there's any chance that she gets some sort of offer that does not include incarceration?
No, I think that ship has sailed. You heard the state attorneys talk about this afternoon that they've not formally extended an offer, and now that the fact that they've convicted her husband, I don't see them extending anything that doesn't include some time in custody. You know, Vinny, the only thing I was thinking about is if this case does go to trial, I think she's going to have to take the stand. I know we talked about that earlier in the program, and somebody's got to put a human face on these people. And I understand that their defense lawyer for Tim said, you know, he's not required to get up there and prove his innocence. Sometimes putting your client on the stand is not about proving your innocence. It's about trying to show who they are and put a human face and try to explain to the jury why they made the decisions they made. So if she does go to trial, I think she needs to get up there and speak. And I think the defense needs to take the other angle that, you know what, there were other kids in this home who were not being punished the same way. So if they were true, in theory, if they were true child abusers, wouldn't it stand to reason that they would be equally horrible to everyone? We only did this to this one person who was having discipline problems. So if she does take the stands, those are two things that I think the defense is going to have to hammer home.
So, Dr. Lacey, let me ask you about the victim in this case. He's very mature, very bright, and I think it's clear he understands that this whole scenario and his testimony helped convict his father. So how does he process that, and what kind of help do you think he'll need in dealing with having gone through all this and one, if not both of his parents end up in prison?
Well, now that there's been a verdict, I would imagine that he will have to continue. I would imagine he's in counseling and has support systems around him. So this would be this next phase of him processing and him being able to accept. But I do believe that when we heard him and we heard some of his testimony and even asking people to forgive, that there's probably, what I would hear is there's a certain level of acceptance of what has happened and what's going on. So I would imagine that he's been going through therapy, he's having counseling or having coaching and being around people who are supportive to allowing him to express himself.
Big thank you, Wayne Richter, Dr. Janie Lacey. Appreciate your insight tonight, and we will speak again.